What's up? It's Tre Harris here, wide receiver for Los Angeles Chargers, and you're tuning in to Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to Chargers Unleashed. Dan Wolkenstein here with special guest Rhim from ESPN. Rhim. I almost put this as Rhim, not Rhim. I have to change it. Welcome to Chargers Unleashed, Kris. Thank you so much for coming on. Lots to talk about here with camp battles heating up, training camp with the pads now down in San Diego. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. First day of pads. It was a good day. It was probably the most high energy day. Good time to evaluate the line play. Thought some players stood out, so it was a good day, and I'm sure we'll get into that here in a second. I just left practice, so cooling down in the hotel room. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you got ice packs, you got your water with ice cubes. Like, it's freaking hot out there the last couple of weeks. How have you been dealing with it?
So I'm sorry for looking at my phone and trying to answer a text, but no, it's rough, and I haven't really been wearing a hat or anything, just shades. So kind of just been dealing with it. It's fine. I mean, it's hot though. It is brutal, but they practice at 10 a.m. So it could be worse. Like if they're practicing at 1 p.m., it would be rough. But so it's all right. It's hot though. It's hot for LA. Like for Atlanta or Baltimore camp, like I've covered before, or New York, it's probably even a little bit cool for that, I guess. But I'm a softie now to it, living out here for a couple years now. So
I don't blame you. California looks good on you. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Lots to go through today. Day one in pads. We all saw the Rashawn Slater, I think, scare. We'll talk about that. Don't worry. I think he's okay. So I'll get your take on that. But from what I've seen so far, it looks like we've seen a lot of Justin Herbert dealing. The defense going crazy at times. This wide receiver core is looking pretty good, pretty versatile. And then that defensive line, offensive line battles, there's all kinds of stuff. But from your point of view, 50,000-foot view, biggest takeaway so far, not just from today, but from the entirety of camp?
Biggest takeaway from the entirety of camp is it's a good question. I think the biggest one is that I think Akheem Mesidor looks the part. I mean, I think that it has been only one day in pads, right? But you could tell by the way a guy hits the sled or their individual drills or their process. I've gone over to the other side of the field to watch Akheem kind of most days, almost every day now, just to see his process and to see how he attacks. And he just looks, his hands are so explosive off the ball. His hands are so explosive. So I would say, and also that Khalil Mack also just looks young. He just looks young. He looks smooth. When all the edge rushers go through the drill, somehow he still looks the smoothest at 35. So those are my biggest takeaways, Khalil and Akheem.
Okay, so defensive line's looking fresh, which I like. Top storylines for today. We'll kind of run through these. We've seen, got to talk about it at the top, but we've seen all of the updates from Justin and from everyone within Charger circles about the new footwork, about the new stance, the new scheme with Mike McDaniel. It sounds like today Justin Herbert was dealing. Talk to us about what you saw today at camp with pads day one.
Yeah, Justin was looking sharp. He completed his first 8 passes that sent the defense into a frenzy, kind of after the first period. Steve Clinkscale was walking up and down the sidelines, yelling at the defensive backs, telling them how they completed, barking out all these, orders and disappointment with them, telling them how they completed more passes in that period than they had completed all week, and how they're embarrassing him and themselves, and even Derwin James gathered the safeties together and was telling them hey, we need to lock in the conversation of bro, we got to be better, we got to be sharper. And yeah, Justin Herbert was dealing for that first period, as he has been all camp. It was automatic.
I was gonna say, is it any different than we've seen in previous years? Because I feel like anytime Justin's out there during camp, he's dealing. It seems like a yearly evergreen tweet, if you will. Is there anything different about it this year?
I don't think there's, and sorry again, I don't think there's anything significantly different except maybe his shotgun stance. Well, there is differences, right? I think he's throwing with more anticipation. and he's getting the ball out a little bit quicker than we've seen before. So you can tell that all of these guys are moving at a quicker pace because of Mike McDaniel's influence. So overall, I think Justin is still Justin, but you can see how McDaniel's influencing him in the offense. The ball is coming out before he's throwing, and all quarterbacks do this, and he was doing this before, but I think he's throwing to a spot more so than he ever has in his career, right? Like, you always want to throw with anticipation, and Justin obviously always has, but I feel more so he's throwing, before these guys, so much quicker before these guys even get out of their breaks, and it gives them opportunity to make plays with the ball. And we won't really get a chance to see exactly how much difference the yards after catches until we see the preseason and until we see the actual season when Justin plays. But even in camp, you can see the potential.
And it sounds like it's a lot more timing and anticipation to where he's less about throwing it at a person, more at a target. Like, this is where that person should be. You better be in this position. I'm throwing it here versus I'm going to throw it to you over there when you're over there because that's where you are. And so I feel like there's a lot more trust that you have to have in the player and the play calling to actually be correct, or else he's left out to dry.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have, kind of as Mike has explained, when you're as talented as Justin, it's easy to want to just use your big arm and will things to, will whatever to your desires, right? Because you can force the ball in tight windows, or you can make plays happen that other people can't. But trusting, and McDaniel said he even has heard from Herbert, like when he threw a pass to Ladd a few practices ago, where Herbert was like, "Yeah, I felt like I threw that one early, but it was perfect." And one thing about having Mike there is that there's proof in the pudding. Like,
it works.
Easier to trust Mike because you've seen it work with Tua, you've seen it work with Matt Ryan, you've seen it work at many of his different stops with these different QBs who have had historic years under him, or QBs who, even QBs who were this level who went to that level because of Mike. Then you have a QB who's as talented as maybe any of those guys. What could it look like?
I know the offense and Justin Herbert was dealing a bit to start out the day, but it sounds like from following you and other folks that are kind of there on the scene, sounds like defense kind of ratcheted it up a bit. Talk to us about how the defense kind of sunk in and kind of got their payback.
Yeah, quickly after DB's coach Steve Clinkscale got into the defensive backs, they turned up the intensity, the whole defense, and really throughout the rest of the day dominated, I would say. Kendall Williamson picked off Justin Herbert. He was on a pass intended for Lab McConkey. He had a great break on the ball. It was a good throw. It would have got in there if Kendall hadn't made such a great play. So that was impressive by him. Kendall's a guy who, made the 53 last year. He's in a battle for that safety spot, and plays like that is going to earn him, points to making the roster. So that was big. And then we saw the interior defensive line just kind of dominating all day. Tier, Tart, Justin Eboigbe, Jamari Caldwell, and those guys on the inside. And I'm, not naming everybody, so don't say I'm not naming somebody they didn't play well. But just that whole interior group. Tier had probably what would have been a sack, and then the edge rushers, right? Dame Tucker, he just dominated, and I thought he was really explosive off the line. He beat Travis Burke a few times coming off the edge. And Dame, I don't know what I said, Dame, coming off the edge. So I thought the defense as a whole really dominated from that beginning part of practice when Justin was dealing to just getting after it.
Now, there's two sides to that story, right? You could talk about the defense balling. You could talk about the defensive line, for example, right? Maybe dominating a little bit, which is great for the defense, right? But if you're the offensive line coach, or if you're those offensive linemen, it's not feeling too good. So in your opinion, is that like good defensive line, or is it concern for the interior offensive line?
I would say good defensive line because they don't have their starters yet, maybe. And I think that, but it's hard to say that because in the regular season, guys are going to get hurt and there's going to be rotation, especially with this team. So I don't like sometimes saying like, well, they were injured or someone's not there, because it's like injuries are going to happen, especially with this team. So I would say both, actually. So maybe I would say that they're okay. let me rephrase this. I'm going to answer this now correctly and not confuse.
Rewind.
I think defense. I think it's good defense because at this point in camp, offense is always a little bit behind, especially in a new system, right? Like the offense is always, and I guess it's timing with the receivers and it's more of that than anything else. But I also think there is something to be said about the offensive line adjusting to like a new blocking scheme and learning how to block in different ways, particularly with this zone blocking scheme. I guess in pass, it's kind of the same thing, but you're learning to run off the ball differently. You're learning to angle your body in different ways, right? So I would say that would be the answer to my question is that good defense more so than bad offensive line, right? But that's a good question you pose, and I'm sorry. Yeah, that's why it took me a second to answer it because I think there's a little bit of nuance to the answer and it's not really straightforward, a little complicated. Sorry for being complicated there.
No, but honestly, I think that's what sometimes people forget, right? Is like you can talk about the dominant side of the ball, whatever, right? But then there's the flip side of that too, of what is that offensive line coach talking about with that offensive line after they just got dominated? But I guess good transition though, like offensive line, crazy amount of updates this year. We've talked about it ad nauseum ever since the season, ever since last season. The left guard spot, there's a ton of people jockeying for that one. Obviously, you got a new center, new right guard as well. Like, talk to us about just how the offensive line looked like today in pads. Any kind of key insights or things there that you saw live versus what we see in the recaps?
Yeah, I think the offensive line looked all right. I think the biggest thing or the biggest notable element of the O-line today, or the biggest standout from the O-line today was Rashawn Slater going down with an injury. He left practice and went to the medical tent. It looked like a left leg thing, and obviously he ruptured his patellar tendon last year in that left knee, but I think Slater's going to be fine. Justin Herbert said that he talked to Slater, and Slater said that he could have went back in, but kind of the medical staff was just like, don't even worry about it today. But Slater got back after he didn't finish practice. He got back in the fourth quarter finisher that the team does, where all the players like work out on the field. And then he walked around with his family. So I think all that is a good sign that Slater's injury wasn't anything super serious. But as for the O-line, I thought Joe Alt and Slater looked great. I thought that the interior fluctuated between bad and good. But I also think that, you got to, and this is going to also contradict a bit what I said earlier about the defensive line. But if you watch a Chargers practice, the whistle was blown like 2.4 seconds into the play, which means that the defensive line essentially needs to chill, or like the people at the line of scrimmage need to relax, right? Like, don't go too hard. You don't want anybody to get hurt. So Akheem Mesidor was almost talking to us about this the other day because he's like, within our rush, we have to stop and run towards the ball, which can almost get you into bad habits if you get into that process. But you have to be intentional about your rep and understand what you're doing. And I say that to say these trench players, these offensive line and defensive line players are in a difficult spot here because of the way the practice is coached in terms of when they're going up against each other, their priority is so much on keeping each other healthy that I feel like it might be difficult at times to do your job to the best.
To win or lose, yeah.
Yeah, to win or lose. And it's like, so yeah, the play fluctuated on the outside and guys got beat. But sometimes I wonder, did he get beat because he stopped at the 2.4 seconds and this player didn't stop? Right. Like where's the whistle blew and I see some guys still going, some not. So it's a balance. And that's why sometimes I try not to say like give everyone sacks and stuff because sometimes it's not accurate. So yeah, I think the O-line has looked good and about what you'd expect. And I'm sorry all my answers are super long, but I feel like the context is needed for this stuff at camp. So
it's important. Yeah, and I guess your concern for the interior offensive line as it's currently constructed, again, we don't know who the starter is going to be at left guard. I think we know right guard and center, obviously, but what's your concern level, 1 to 10, 10 being like you're about to have a heart attack, of this offensive line as it's currently stated?
Concern.
If it was week 18 last year, it'd be like a 10, 11, right? Like this team was
Yeah, I'd
decimated.
probably say concern, probably like a 3, 4, maybe. I don't think it really. I'm not that concerned. I mean, I think that, like you said, last season we saw offensive line with like the 6th and 7th string players playing at left and right tackle. Like we've seen the worst of the worst. So I think any offensive line that has Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater bookending the line, my level of concern is going to be less. Especially, I think Slater's okay. If I thought Slater's injury was serious, my concern would be like a 10. But yeah, I think they're going to be fine, and I think that Mike McDaniel has been able to overcome middling guard play throughout his career. They haven't been a priority. The guards, at least, center and tackles, have been what it is, and the guard priority is, can you move in space, right? Like can the people who play guard move? That's really the priority there. Like, can you move, and then we'll work around the other stuff. So I'm like a 4. I don't think. I think they need to find a starter, obviously, sooner rather than later. And I do think the process of rotating 5 guys in at left guard is interesting.
That's tough.
It's probably the nicest way to describe it, because how do you
You're
even
cutting
have
reps in 5. Yeah.
how do you even have a legit, like, how is Branson getting a fair shot? He just got, you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that process. I think having 5 there is a strange process.
And I wonder if that number will go down as the days go on.
I mean, it has to.
Now.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I mean, Jim said today. Jim named all of them today. So I don't know, but
So one of those, Jake Slaughter, I think I heard Jim Harbaugh mention that he's ahead of schedule with the ramp up period and all of that. I'm paraphrasing, but what do you make so far of how the rookies looked?
oh, sorry. I think Jake he's looked fine. I think he's play again. This is the first day in pads, and we saw him again rotating with the kind of second and third groups at center and then at left guard. And he looked fine. He didn't look like he was getting overwhelmed, or he didn't look like he didn't belong on the field, right? But I think we're going to need to see, because today Kaide Abusika and Trey Pipkins rotated at left guard, and so I think he's looked fine. I mean, I think a better evaluation on Jake is going to come after a few practices when we've seen him at that left guard spot. So yeah, I would say right now, Jim Harbaugh said Jake's way ahead of schedule, but I did think it was interesting when he was naming the people who are in the race at left guard. Jim said that Kaide was in the lead at left guard, and then he mentioned Trey Pipkins, then he mentioned Trevor Penning, and then he mentioned Jake, who they drafted in the second round to play left guard. So that made my ears stand up, my eyebrows raise a little bit. And he said, well, Jake's way ahead of schedule, and he's in the mix too, kind of like a throw in. And that made and maybe I'm just reading into it, the journalist in me.
It also might be him as a coach trying to get him to have to earn it, right? Like I'm sure he thinks through everything.
Exactly. Trying to make a rookie feel like they don't have, you know what I mean? And playing mind games with us and maybe any other team that thinks they know who they're going to start, who might be watching that press conference. So that's what I think of Jake. I think Jake has been solid.
Now, last thing on the offensive line before we get to some of the skill positions here. Looking at the center position, I think we've seen how important a good center is, and also how impactful a bad center is in respect to their play on the field. Talk to us about what you've seen with Tyler Biadasz so far and some of the major differences in how he navigates practice versus what you saw the last few years.
I mean, honestly, there's not much I can tell you right now. I mean, I think if I told you right now, I'd say Tyler and Bradley go about practice the same way. It's what I would tell you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, in terms of Tyler and Bradley have similar personalities. They're similar leaders. Like, you watch and you see Tyler coaching up a rookie, or coaching up a younger player, or coaching up a position player. You see Bradley or Tyler making checks at the line, pointing things out, right? But for me to say, like, Tyler looks miles better than Bradley
fair.
after one padded practice would be probably crazy and like irresponsible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's fair.
But yeah, so I just think for me to give you like a proper answer with Tyler, like just give me a couple more padded practices because with the unpadded practices, it's a lot of stand up.
You can't do anything with the trenches.
Exactly. But yeah, so that's what I would say with Tyler for now. Sorry about that.
No, and honestly, I'm glad you don't just blow smoke and because that's irresponsible. You got ESPN that's paying you too.
Yeah.
So maybe last thing on the offense, we've seen a ton of people talk about Mike McDaniel and the vibes are immaculate with the shades, the shoes, and just all of it, right? But on the field, they're at practice. Like I've heard quite a few people talk about the tempo is different for the offense specifically. But what are some tactical, tangible differences that you have seen with how he does things versus what we saw with Greg Roman? You can get granular, or you can say high level, but I feel like there's a endless amount you can talk through. But what are the biggest things that you think are most impactful?
I mean, maybe the biggest is motions, man. I mean, screens. I mean, they have screens now. The Chargers are throwing screens, man. You see Lad McConkey screens. You see Darius Davis on screens. You see, and then you also see a lot of motion before the ball is snapped. You see that little cheat motion that Tyreek Hill that he made famous in Miami with Tyreek Hill and Jaden Wilder. You see Lad on a lot of those. You see Brennan on some of those. You see Darius on some of those. You also see Q getting in space more than he was with Roman. I think Quentin is at his best when he's catching a drag or a crosser and in space. But I feel like under the last regime, he was too often treated as a big X, like a Mike kind of receiver, Mike Williams, who could go up and get 50 balls, which he can do, but I don't think that's a strong suit. So those are the biggest differences I've seen so far. And I will say, though, that while I'm saying that about Q, Mike McDaniel mentioned Q in the same breath as Andre Johnson and Julio Jones. So he might see Q as
okay.
Who could be.
What does Kris think about this? Quentin Johnston, year 4.
I've always been a supporter of Q, man. I always thought that the fan base. Yeah, I always thought, but I don't know if I see Andre and Julio. But I do see a good receiver, right? I think too many people think about Q from his rookie year, and it's he's not that guy. Q might not. He's not your superstar 1-tier receiver, right? He's not JSN, but he's a good quality. He had 8 touchdowns the last 2 seasons. He would have had more yards last season if he didn't have to sit out a couple games hurt. So I think Q is a good receiver, and I think what Mike is saying is that he has some of the physical gifts that can't be taught, that those guys have, big, tall, fast, powerful, twitchy.
And that I could see. And I said that. That I could see. How he looks, the things he could be able to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. Okay, you mentioned Akheem Mesidor. And when he was drafted, folks had talked about how people were concerned about his age, about the things that would entail from a negative standpoint. But I feel like people forget what his age provides them positively from a maturity level, from a work ethic perspective, from a physicality perspective. What are you seeing from Mesidor so far that has been impressive to you or to the team?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I think Mesidor just looks explosive. And also his process has impressed his teammates in terms of he's one of the first people out on the field at every practice, going through his pre-practice routine, which is usually, stretching and then going through some swim moves. Tuli called him a pro. He just said, Akheem's 2 years older than Tuli. And he just said, he has a process. He gets it down.
So weird.
And he seems like he's been in the league for a while. Khalil also said he's been impressed with Akheem. So I think for one, that's been impressive. And then his explosiveness and his tools. He's so gifted. He's a really skilled rusher. And he's a really explosive rusher, and he's comfortable inside and out. So that gives the Chargers some versatility, and it's one of the reasons why they drafted him. But yeah, I'd say Akeem's explosiveness and his process and preparation is what have stood out so far.
All right. So speaking of explosiveness, I think lots of folks are getting jazzed about the potential and what they've seen so far from Brennan Thompson. And you look at this wide receiver core in general between Brennan and Tre and Q and like the list just kind of goes on and on. KLS starting to break out now. Darius getting some flashes. But from a Brennan Thompson perspective, like, is the hype real? Because I feel like you're seeing praises from some of his teammates that aren't usually mentioned for rookie later round draft picks like this.
Yeah, I mean, he's been performing. So I guess the answer to the question, is the hype real, would only be I would only be able to answer, I guess, once he played in like a regular season game, just to know whether the training camp hype was the real hype. Like, we've had training camp stars every year that we haven't really heard from in the regular season.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I remember the Michael Bandies of the world. I remember all the Joe Reeds. But I'm saying that's what I'm saying. But that's also very different, right? Like, we know what can translate, what doesn't.
Yeah, and I was gonna say last year, Keandre Lambert-Smith was that guy who was a star. He was a star in San Diego. He was a star throughout camp.
True.
He didn't play much during the year, and he had his best day yesterday, but was out today. He didn't practice. So I think Brennan is the thing that Brennan has going for him is he is a guy who fits what Mike wants to do in terms of he has speed. But he's also a lot of these fast guys who come into the league are just like gadget players, or they can't really run routes. They can just run fast in a straight line. But Brennan actually like led the SEC in receiving yards. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he led the SEC in receiving yards. This is a legit receiver in the best conference in college football. And he also runs a 4.26. So the Chargers are going to have a somewhat of a conundrum this year trying to figure out ways to get him on the field, because there's Ladd, there's Quentin, there's Tre, there's Arande, there's Njoku, there's Omarion Hampton, there's Darius Davis. Where does Brennan's going to have to take reps from someone. So in order for him to do that, he has to keep playing like he is. And he is one of the first players that comes out of a lot of these names, that comes out of a lot of these guys' mouths when they're talking about people that stand out, even from Justin Herbert, right? So I think that's a good sign for him in terms of the process to taking reps and taking snaps away from other players. So yeah, Brennan, the hype is real, and we'll see if it translates to him getting some real time during the season.
Because I think what I try to temper my expectations on, and you probably can attest to this, is like, I remember the Michael Bandies. I remember the Joe Reeds. I remember like the off season, the training camp darlings that everyone falls in love with. But then does it translate to the regular season in terms of like, can he do those things against other NFL teams? Mm-hmm. But then B, like, will they have an opportunity to do that? And so you saw KLS, though, like, when called upon, he delivered last year. Yeah. So I try to temper people with like how much you're actually going to see of these players. Will they make an impact? Of course. But how much of an opportunity do they have to do so? That's the question. And that you mentioned Darius Davis. What are your thoughts on his hot seat, or the temperature of his seat right now? Because the way I see it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way I see it, Brennan Thompson, Ladd McConkey, Quentin, all three of those guys are fast, right? Ladd, Brennan, Darius, you got Keaton Mitchell now. There's a bunch of dudes that can do some of those return, gadget, speed type responsibilities. Is Darius's position like in jeopardy right now? Because I look at, hell, just Keaton Mitchell and Brennan Thompson and Darius Davis, and that's kind of redundant. And when you're building a 53-man roster, can you have that much of similar things?
Yeah, I don't think so. In my mind, his seat is pretty cold. I think Darius is the thing with Darius is that, well, for one, the special teams, Ryan Ficken loves Darius, right? Like, Darius was, as a rookie, the best returner in the NFL, the best punt returner in the NFL, maybe second best as a rookie. He was an all-pro as a rookie, and they don't forget that. Like, I think over the past 3 seasons, their average maybe is in the top, I got to look at numbers, so I don't want to miss.
But like
say
last
something
year
wrong.
wasn't that great. Like if we're just being honest,
Yeah.
and he was hurt. I know.
So yep. So Darius was hurt last year. They didn't have a great year. I think return wise, he didn't have a great year, but I think his first 2 years have earned Darius enough trust with this staff in terms of the fact that they know how good he is. And another thing is, just because like a dude is fast doesn't mean that he's a good returner. But Darius has already proven that he's a good returner. And he's also made plays in the offense when given the opportunity to over time with the team. So again, things can change, and I'm not in the room with the decision makers, right? So I'm not saying my opinion is the right one, but from the people I talk to, the way they talk about Darius, I don't think there's any concern. And I think Mike would love to have 3 dudes like Keaton, Brennan, and Darius on the team.
And I wonder if that ends up just becoming like a battle of leadership. Of it's more like Mike McDaniel versus Chris O'Leary versus Ryan Ficken of like who's going to get their guys. Because is Darius Davis talented and can he affect the roster? Sure, but there's only 53, and so if Darius is in, that might mean that like a Junior Colson isn't in, or that might mean an Avery Smith or someone who may have a great camp is out. And so I'll be curious to see like when the dust settles where these positions rank in terms of stack ranking, right? Like is wide receiver 7 or 6 more important than edge 5? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. We'll have to see.
I don't know, man. That's stressing me. I can't get through roster battles right now. Moving forward, you went through a bunch today. Moving forward, we haven't talked about the secondary much. I'll get you out of here on this.
Yeah.
If there's a name or two to watch in the secondary, aside from the obvious, who would be your shots?
I would say the 2 from the secondary are Rodney Shelley and Avery Smith for sure. I mean, I guess Avery Smith's kind of obvious at this point if you've been following Twitter. But those 2 guys, 2 undrafted free agents, those guys have just been consistently making plays. Jim Harbaugh brought up both of them in his press conference today as players who have stood out. I think those 2 guys, we saw 2 undrafted guys make the 53 last year, and Nico Reed and Eric Rogers. So, you never know how the roster is going to shake out. But I would say if there's any spot on the team where like you could have the potential for a UDFA to make it might be at corner. Not that anywhere they couldn't, but that to me looks like a spot where you could definitely win a spot or make the roster. So those 2 guys, Rodney Shelley and Avery Smith, have stood out for sure.
Kris Rhim, you can find him on ESPN all the time, doing all of his cameos, if you will. Kris Rhim 1 on X. A couple more padded practices this week. What are you looking forward to seeing as the week continues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking to see some O-line play so I could give you some better answers about what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what I want to see. I just want to see what the line looks like and how they look when people are trying to kill your quarterback for real. We got a taste of it today, but today they had on shorts. So they had on pads up top, but they didn't even have the full missing half of the padded part of padded practices. So
it's a ramp up period. Remember the ramp up.
It's a glide. It's a glide. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for, man. I'm keeping an eye on the O-line, the interior O-line. I really want to see what the trenches look like. That's what I'm looking out for.
Well, we will be looking out for your ESPN articles as you give us all the dirty over these next few weeks as camp continues. But Kris, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you.